Out of the entire franchise, InFamous Second Son is probably the one with the most polarizing community opinion. So many aspects of it are so incredibly beautiful and polished, and yet others feel entirely devoid of any common sense or care for the product. And since this is one of my favorite franchises of all time, I made an iceberg video about it a while back now. And while researching for it, I came across the fan-made wiki for InFamous. And the page for InFamous Second Son has this little trivia factoid. The game's development cycle went through several hurdles. The first being, after the delay of the Order 1886, Sony ordered Second Son to be moved from a second wave title to a launch title to compensate for a lack of games in the lineup, costing Sucker Punch a year of development. It was later revealed Cole was intended to make an appearance in some fashion, but due to Eric Layden, Cole's voice actor filming American Sniper, he was cut. Instead, Cole's legacy was created. And in 2016, Troy Baker stated in an interview post E3 2016 that much of the script hadn't been written by the time motion and facial capture had started, leading to the actors having to improvise many lines and actions on the spot. I cannot for the life of me find the actual source of this statement. Not any article stating that Second Son was moved up to compensate for the Order 1886, which by the way, Sony, you people were happy to leave this shit in the cooker for another year, but yeah, let's force one of our most trusted studios to quickly crank out the next big thing. Allegedly, if that actually happened. And that's exactly what I'm saying, I can't find any solid proof. But if you ask me, and a lot of other fans, I'm sure some would agree. So I want to go through the game, and merely through what I can actually see in the game, I will try to build some sort of case that would prove that InFamous Second Son's development time was cut down, and most likely abruptly. Now, if there's a thing that certainly doesn't feel like it was rushed in this game, it's certainly the overall look of the game. The graphics, the lighting, Delson's animations, and of course the insane attention to detail of all the little landmarks of Seattle. This game is more than a decade old and it rivals last year's titles. And this being one of the first games to drop for the PS4, I mean, it's truly irregular. Watching all those behind the scenes production videos was crazy. Did you know that when you're playing through the story and it's raining, the puddles on the streets get slowly bigger and bigger, and then the next morning you can see the brick buildings slowly dry over the course of the day? That's insane! So why exactly am I making the case that the game was rushed by starting my argument with the best, most fleshed out part of the game? Well, if anyone else did any research on the development of this game, you'll notice that most interviews and articles you can find mostly talk about exactly that, the early stages, figuring out the PS4 hardware, working the graphics, the particle system that makes Neon look so good, how to put the touch sensor and the motion control bullshit into the game. There's also plenty of articles, with the actors and on the characters and the stories and the powers, of course. But those never go into too much detail, and again, I watched so many Troy Baker interviews and interviews with other actors on the game, and they don't mention any rushing or improvising, even years later, in like podcast interviews and stuff. And most of these interviews were actually done pre-release to really hype up the look of the game and such. But after release, most interviews and articles switch straight to promoting First Light, which I guess kinda makes sense. I mean, it came out just like 4 months later. Anyways, the reason why I bring up the best part of the game here is because it seems to me that these things were in the forefront of development, and that's why all these aspects are the best thing about the game. They're the first things that were worked on, they had the time to really perfect them, and then once the scheduling shift happened, everything else had to be fumbled in quickly. Which brings us to the first of the bad. Now I'm sure many will agree with me that while this fictional version of Seattle is insanely fun to just explore and move through, when it comes to actually doing stuff in it, it kinda comes up short. InFamous 2 had these various missions sprawled throughout its map, each given to you by either a citizen or an ally. There was even karma-based side missions, and some even had their own continuations, such as the Blast Shard Bomber one, or like the Ice Guy keeps evolving, and the evil ones with Nyx. Meanwhile, the side work in Second Son is just kinda there. After destroying the first command center, you're told that the fight to liberate Seattle has begun, and you should do these things to lower the control of the DUP, which yeah, I get. But does Delsin find some document that tells him there's undercover agents and hidden cameras? Sure, the stencil graffiti is self-explanatory, Delsin would just do that, but it would be nice to at least like get a little voice line from Reggie the first time you do it or something. Though it's fair, you might only try the side missions for the first time after the end of the story and well, you know. But anyway, not to just rant, how can I spin this into the whole it's because the development was cut short argument here? Well, I think this game's open world wasn't trying to be like the previous game. It had you first destroy an important DUP controlled area, a good fun fight in the open world to use your powers freely, and after that it sprinkled smaller things to do, destroy cameras, bio checkpoints, free prisoners, such and such. And this actually kind of reminds me of Sucker Punch's next game, Ghost of Tsushima. Foxes and birds leading to collectibles, and bamboo stands and hot springs can be stumbled upon to level yourself up. I think Sucker Punch was experimenting with this style of open world interaction long before GOT. So I think the original idea was to destroy the MCC and then run around the area helping or not helping, with there also being more in-depth side missions. And once you would go through that, you would do the showdown at the billboard moment. But in their rush, they just quickly stuck in a recycled version of, oh, here's a picture of where the stuff is, go get it. And fucking Where's Waldo, which by the way, when I was playing this side mission, the guy I got has the same model as Raymond Wolf from the Cole DLC. Seriously, dude. And then they turned the dead drop collectibles into entire side missions, and then it just reused the signal finder function thing. So this whole seamlessly enter activities in the open world aspect is left very weak. You can still, kill protesters and, do drug busts and shit. And I think this is good evidence for the game being rushed. I mean, do you really think they wanted to make their open world like this after the previous games? I think they wanted to invent a new style of open world activity, and then once they were rushed, they just kind of put something together. So I'm no professional writer, or even an amateur one. So this part of my case will be the weakest, and yet I'm looking at the script and it's the longest. Shit. But I'm not the only person on the internet saying that this game's story and character developments are definitely lacking. Not to mention that the game is actually shorter than its prequels, at least it has less main missions. There's a lot less of those, animated comic book style cutscenes, and instead of an animated cutscene doing the exposition at the start, like InFamous 2, it's just a wall of text. There's less cutscenes overall, which some people might prefer, but I don't. And I mean, Delsin barely interacts with anyone throughout the game. Reggie, our brother, the character we're supposed to see overcome his prejudices of conduits, or not if we're doing evil playthrough, and we're supposed to really feel the weight of his death. This character is mostly interacted with over the phone. In InFamous 2 you had characters constantly debating and talking, planning on the roof or some other location. Meanwhile in this game you start a mission and it's just a phone call telling you to go somewhere else. It's hard to feel a connection between these characters like that. Not to mention Reggie's switch up in literally the span of 2 missions. Reggie goes from, "Oh wow Delsin, you said you lost your powers? Thank goodness, you're no longer a freak. Let's just abandon our quest to save the lives of our entire people, including the woman that raised us after our parents' death. At least you're normal again." He goes from that to, "Well, I'm gonna risk my life and help you and this repeat offender conduit fugitive because conduits are people and our tribe needs help. Yeah, I see that now. I'll probably be fine." It just feels rushed, it does. There's no other way to say it. Not to mention the fact that if you play on Evil Karma, there's no variation in Reggie's final dialogue, which might be my biggest complaint of the entire game. Trish's death in the first game, while still kinda being an example of fridging, to be honest, at least had the decency to change depending on your actions. Her shunning you if you were evil, and her embracing you if you did heroic things. On a full evil playthrough, Delsin does nothing but prove Reggie's convictions right. He kills police officers, unarmed protesters, and much worse. For as little as we're shown Reggie, we all know he wouldn't look Delson in the eye and tell him that he's proud of him after that. They had to have planned to change that but couldn't. I'm also guessing Eugene's boss fight was planned and designed earlier, since it's an actually cool and unique boss fight that lets you use the full extent of your previously earned powers. While fetches must have come later, since it's boiled down to drain and shoot. Sure, in an iconic location, the crocodile, I get that, but overall not an interesting boss fight. Not to mention that the next time we see Hank after the betrayal, we can just kinda snipe him from afar and instantly cuts to the cutscene. Like, is there something missing here? I feel like there could have been a boss fight in this park again with him kinda like dashing around like he did in the fish cannery. All the characters barely go a bit deeper than their archetype, if they're lucky. Not to mention the several inconsistencies, like Delson knowing the term core relay before it's ever explained to him, if it even ever is. And there's plenty of other cases, like I guess Fetch and Eugene just escaped being encased in concrete with their hands bound and then thrown into the ocean, despite the fact that we literally just witnessed the fact that hands are very important when it comes to power handling via that slow walk section. It's almost like the characters were just sloppily thrown into situations to provoke conflict and drama without actually considering the world building. I honestly think that before the rescheduling was announced to Sucker Punch, again if that's what actually happened, I think they had some sort of rough story draft, some ideas for action/combat set pieces, such as the He Who Dwells fight and some other stuff, and probably some actually storyboarded/scripted cutscenes to motion capture. But after they got the order to hurry up, it was all a rushed production. There's no time to record and act out another motion capture cutscene. We need to tell the player this info. Okay, just make it a phone call. No time to make that stencil art comic book animated cutscene either. Okay guys, look, we don't have time for this, okay? Just put Troy Baker in the booth and have him say some cool shit, okay? And then put Travis Willingham in the booth and have him complain that Troy said some cool shit, and then tell him to go to this location and do a thing. And on that note, the voice acting, I'm definitely not saying that it's bad, it's actually quite great. But remember that line from that supposed Troy Baker interview? That much of the script hadn't been written by the time motion and facial capture had started, leading to the actors having to improvise many lines and actions on the spot. Like I said, I can't confirm that, but what I can confirm is that quite often the subtitles in the game don't line up with what the characters actually say.
You can keep that. A little early Christmas gift for you. The government infused them all with enough to still do some serious damage.
At first I thought it might be that the voice lines just change between playthroughs, kinda like GTA 5, but no. Lines are always the same and the subtitles are always wrong. So this could be proof of a rush production, or maybe the subtitle and audio guy just didn't communicate, I'm not sure anyway. So the pacing of the events, the lack of karma variety, character depth and interaction, the improper subtitles, it all makes for some compelling evidence. So the concrete power is just unfinished. I can't be convinced otherwise. I mean, no way in hell did they actively want it to not have a karma bomb, or an execute/subdue option. And maybe there was even a grenade plan, but they just quickly added in that little jump, which I do kinda like, reminds me of the ice launch, but it's worse of course. And yeah, it's just simply an unfinished aspect of the game in my opinion. Otherwise, the gameplay is definitely another aspect of the game that is always praised for, and for good reason. It looks good, feels good, and the enemy AI is also pretty competent on any difficulty, but your allies, oof man. It actually degrades as you progress through the game. Reggie is the most fleshed out, and even he doesn't do too well. Fetch barely moves on her evil mission during combat, and on the good one she just doesn't. She only moves during the scripted tail the van bit, and then the human version of Eugene just isn't even programmed in. Only his He Who Dwells final form is, which you could argue is for the story's sake since he's a bit antisocial and such, but I don't know. It's still suspicious, like we never see the human version of Eugene in-game, seriously only in cutscenes. And yeah, Hank is also your ally for a while, but his combat and movement was programmed for the start of the game as well, so they just basically reused him. In the previous games, not only did your allies fight well, but you could combine your powers in like a combo. with doing that pacifist run on Second Son, I figured out the hard way that the fucking allies are useless. So I think that's another good piece of evidence. Like, they probably wanted to make the ally AI better. Look, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone will ever come forward from Sucker Punch, not because they don't want to, but because if this game truly was rushed to release before it had the chance to be finished the way the studio wanted it finished, it happened because of Sony and not Sucker Punch. And Sony won't let people talk shit about them, especially one of its most prized exclusive companies. But there's still so many good set pieces from the game. Walking through the longhouse, seeing all the damage Augustine has done. Just that entire prologue section is beautiful, really. It's got these little trinkets of beauty. I can only be left to dream how much of an astounding game this could have been if it was truly finished. Maybe InFamous would have become a mainstream PlayStation exclusive along with God of War and Uncharted and such. But maybe if that happened, we wouldn't have gotten the Ghost of games, and I also really like those, so no point in thinking about what if. We just gotta make do with what we have. But if anyone does wanna see me make my ideas for a Second Son remake similar to what I did for the first game, let me know. And to end it off just on a good note, when I started another playthrough to get the footage for this video, I said to myself, I'm just gonna speedrun through the missions, just get the clips I need and move on to editing. But I stayed for longer than I needed to. I liberated like 3 sections of the map, I think. I did most of the graffiti because the game is just that fun. It feels good to move, to fight, and it looks fantastic while doing it. At the end of the day, the tagline of the game is enjoy your powers, and that's what I do every time. And also the soundtrack is fantastic.